Well, hello everyone. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, and welcome to the .NET conference, wherever you're watching from. Apologies for the delay and uh, getting ourselves organized a bit more. But yeah, here we are. So first of all, my heart goes out to everyone that is suffering from the severe flood in Pakistan. Hopefully, things improve, and please help out, guys, by donating to various charities across the world who are organizing help for the people who are affected by the flooding. Um, let's continue to our session. My name is Syed Hoque. I'm a senior software engineer at a company called Retail Insight. We're based in the UK, but we have headquarters around the world, including Australia and the US. Um, you can reach out to me on Twitter if you want to, or LinkedIn after the session. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to, try and help out you guys out as much as I can. We got a small agenda for today. First of all, we're going to have a little bit of background about the company and myself. We're going to talk a little bit about Xamarin Forms, .NET MAUI, moving on to Appium, and we'll attempt a demo as well. There will be time for Q&A based on how we do it timing-wise, and then we'll conclude. There's a small background about our company. Our exposure to Xamarin Forms was back in 2016, when we had a field company coming to us and asking for an application to be developed for both iOS, Android, and desktop. So Xamarin became no-brainer for us because it offers cross-platforms, and we had people in the engineering team who were specialized in WPF and C#. Well, it wasn't as nice and smooth ride that we thought it would be in the early Xamarin days, but as the time progressed, we found our footing. We learned about the MVVM approach, shared components, wrote custom renderers, effects, and automated our builds using CI/CD pipelines in Microsoft App Center and PS Azure DevOps. So a little bit about Xamarin Forms. I'm not going to go into in depth how it works and whatnot, but just a brief overview. Xamarin Forms is a mature technology and SDK based on .NET C# that we all love or hate, give or take a new context. It's battle tested, as in, from my personal experience, we built an app for trading, for custodial crypto wallet, and banking app in the UK. We have a big upcoming project in our company for one of the biggest retailers in the world, in the UK. So as a part of that, I was asked to evaluate both Xamarin Forms and .NET MAUI to find out who should be the best suitable candidate for us. When it comes to Xamarin Forms, like I said, it's very mature, battle tested, and open source. There's plenty of third-party libraries available for us to do various things and help out. There's also plenty of customized control they can purchase from third parties to help yourself and accelerate your development work. It can also utilize native libraries that is written in Swift, Objective-C, Java, or Kotlin. Of course, you have to build your own binding library, and from personal experience, it's not as easy as it should be, but you can get there. As far as we know, Xamarin Forms will be sunsetting in May 1st, 2024. That is still an extension over the original end-of-life support that we had. It was announced in this .NET conference in last month that actually we're extending the life of Xamarin Forms to support Android 13, Xcode 14, and both iPad and iOS 16. That will be the final version that Xamarin Forms is going to target. That actually moves up to the next stage, which is .NET MAUI. I actually had the opportunity to catch up with David Otenau from Microsoft, who's the program manager for both MAUI and Xamarin Forms team, to get a bit of overview of where MAUI is and where are we going. So David, if you're watching this, thank you very much for your help and appreciate the time. So .NET MAUI, again, I'm not going to go into very nitty-gritty things and deep dive into .NET MAUI because the focus of this presentation would be to automation testing. So we'll get into it in a bit. So .NET MAUI is aptly named, as you could imagine, is multi-platform app UI. It's a cross-platform framework written for mobile app from ground up. Under the hood is the C# and XAML. But look at the first bullet point, which is MAUI is the future. So when I actually spoke to David and our, the management team about evaluating which technological stack we should actually start using for our future projects, it's a no-brainer because all the efforts and time are going to be invested in .NET MAUI rather than Xamarin Forms, which is still beloved and linger around for a bit longer than we'd expect it to be. But again, let me emphasize, .NET MAUI is the future. So it's the evolution of Xamarin Forms, written from ground up for testability and extension. So it also has support for .NET class, .NET 6 base class library, which is the fastest .NET as of yet. I'll put an asterisk on the point because right now, when I was actually preparing for the demo, I realized there's a blog post came out about the improvements made in .NET 7 BCL, and it was so big, the page really took quite long, and I heard people actually struggling to load the page, just the number of improvements made on .NET 7. So that's also coming to .NET MAUI because it's a workload now, no longer an NuGet package they can download and use. It also provides you a single and modern project structure. Gone are the days of having platform-specific UI projects. You can still access platform-specific APIs and have them in your code. However, it's in a single project structure now. If you're familiar and keeping an eye on how the development has been progressing for .NET MAUI, you'll see what I mean once we go to the demo. It provides a hot reload as well, so developer in a loop, make a change. You don't have to do build and deployment again. You can just change your code live, and you'll see the changes reflected on your emulator device or simulators, whichever one you're using at the moment. I've seen a fast adoption from library maintainers. So most of the packages that we actually use nowadays, they're either in preview or in beta. Some of them actually made it to release to support .NET MAUI. Most of them are backported by registering their renderers as a custom handler in .NET MAUI rather than building it from ground up. But there are packages that are actually being purely built for .NET MAUI. So it is being adopted, very well received from the developers and library maintainers around the world. CI/CD support is also upcoming. There's no support for it App Center at the moment. However, you can build using GitHub Action and Azure DevOps with a bit of scripting. You may actually get it to work in App Center as well, but wouldn't recommend it. However, according to David, they are thinking about it and support may be coming, so who knows. And the last point we had the question mark, which is UI testing framework. When I asked David about the matter, he said it is something that we're looking into it because Xamarin Forms has built-in UI testing framework, but .NET MAUI doesn't. So ideally, Microsoft would like to test MAUI using MAUI, but which still doesn't exist. However, from the meeting I had with David, the outcome of the meeting is I should have a quick look into third-party frameworks which actually support mobile application UI automation testing. So enter Appium. I should actually, again, thanks to David for pointing that out. So it actually made me explore and go and learn about Appium. So I'm here to share my experience and knowledge today, whatever I learned so far. I'm still learning, so bear with me as we find out and polish a bit of rough edges that we have at the moment. So Appium is an open framework. Under the hood, it uses native testing framework that is provided by the vendors. For example, for iOS, for both for simulators and devices, it uses Xcode UI test. For Android, it uses UI Automator. What it actually does is it abstracts away those under the hood implementation into common set of APIs and provides client libraries for Java, Ruby, Python, PHP, most importantly, C#, because that's what we're here for, right? So at the heart of the Appium structure is client-server architecture. So it's basically nothing more than a web server that actually reasons for REST API calls. And those calls get translated into under the hood, whichever framework you're targeting, whether it's iOS, whether it's Android. So you would go and use the domain-specific or vendor-specific framework to actually launch your app and whatnot. The key takeaway is essentially supports natively built applications, hybrid, and web. So it doesn't only apply to MAUI, it also applies to application written in React Native, application written in Xamarin Forms for that matter. If your device or simulator can actually run it, Appium can test it. So that's the benefit of it. And you don't have to recompile your application to make it compatible. If back in the days for Xamarin Forms, we have to do an if-def for debug application and make sure the Calabash framework is inserted in the debug application. And if you upload that package to, let's say, App Store, Apple will come and find you and they will burn your house down. So I wouldn't recommend it. And with Appium, you don't have to worry about that because you're not changing anything at all. It's basically tinkering with your application as it is. So the benefit is you're testing exactly the same app that you're going to ship to the App Store and your customer. We'll try and keep these slides to minimum as much as I can. So without further ado, let's pray to demo gods. I'll share my screen and jump into some demos. I'm using my second monitor here, so I'm just going to move my shift focus way, but I'll be still talking and you can still see me, hopefully. Let's bring up my IDE. To test, I'll bump up the font size a bit, zoom in as well as we go along. Before I actually talk about the test, let's talk about how actually Appium actually going to work. So Appium provides both CLI and a GUI client that you need to run on your machine where you're going to run your test. For this demo purpose, I will be using GUI version, but you can use CLI as well. It's exactly the same. We just need to start the server and forget about it. Only settings that you require to provide is when you actually run and install the app, going to edit configuration, and you probably have to provide the SDK location for both Android and Java, your Java home directory. If it decides to load those, I'll try and show you. Well, that didn't work. Let's try one more time. Here we go, this time it loaded. So all we have to provide, where is our Android SDK located at, to a variable called Android home and Java. If you don't know where these are located, you can actually go to your IDE preferences and find out under Android build tools where your Android SDK is located and where your Java HomeKit is located. So that's it. So having said that, we're just going to start the server, and you can see it starts and listening on localhost at port 4723. That's all the only thing we need to remember here. Then we can forget about it. Now let's focus on the actual project. So this is nothing short of a file new template for .NET MAUI. As you can see, the project structure would look familiar to you if you've been following what's going on in the MAUI world and whatnot. Only changes I made is in the main page. If we scroll down, you'll see it's exactly the same sample that we have. Only tweak I have made here, let's zoom out a bit so you can see better. Only change that I made is to these two buttons. I've added in a second button called Alert button. I provided them automation ID. I'll also take the liberty of adding automation ID to the first button, which is called counter button. And there's a click event handler for the second button, which does nothing but just displays a pop-up or an alert in our language. Just says, oh, hello, this is an alert, and you can just dismiss it. That's all the change we have here. So if you go ahead and run this, I'll try and run it for the Android emulator first. We can cover both iOS as well. Here we go. So as you can see, it's just nothing short of file new. We have a button that actually increments every time you click it, and we have a button that actually displays an alert, and you can dismiss it. That's all we have at the moment. Nothing going on. So let's shift our focus to the actual testing page now, or project, if my Zoom works. There we go. So the project being in place, and what I did, I added in a new unit test project. This is nothing again short of like file new. Adding a new project is just unit test because we're targeting .NET MAUI. Make sure it's in .NET Core template that you select from, and targeting .NET 6. Stick to the flavor that you like, NUnit, XUnit, whatever. For this test case, I stuck around with NUnit. Let me give you an overview of the project architecture as well. So this is being an unit test project. You know, when we do code testing, I need to write unit testing or TDD. We have to reference the existing project because this is actually doing UI testing. We don't have to reference anything. And this is lovely to see that actual CS project file is nothing short of few lines and declarations. This is very amazing. Gone are the days of being, puzzled by what this directive do, what this item group is doing, and whatnot. Nothing. So all we need is just 3 packages here to start our testing, which is Appium WebDriver, Selenium support, and Selenium WebDriver. What I found out during this investigation or evaluation, only version up to 3.1 or latest of 3.1 is compatible with Appium WebDriver, because version above them, Selenium, is not actually conforming to the specification provided by WebDriver. So it will run into a runtime issue and compile time issue as well. So for the time being, we have to stick to version 3.1 for Selenium and WebDriver support. Okay, so that's CS Proj. And we already deployed our application to the device. So I'm just going to pin my emulator on top so we can actually see what is going on as we do. And get rid of that window, keep it here. So let's walk through the actual test project. Let's minimize all of them. Now, as you can see, it'll look very familiar to you if you're familiar writing unit tests, either in XUnit or NUnit. Nothing fancy going on. We declare 2 properties, which is driver and options to make this test compatible for both platforms, for Android and iOS. I've taken a shortcut and added in a target specific enum that actually just describes which platform I'm going to run this application or testing against. So I have two at the moment, Android and Apple. I don't know if it's going to work with Tizen, Windows, or Mac Catalyst, but there are documentation available online, so we can have a quick look at as well if we prefer to. Here's my setup method that actually gets called every time a test actually runs or before any test actually runs. So we're doing platform-specific setup here. If we look up above, we could declare the generic version of Appium driver, which is wrapped in Appium web element. But as we change platform, there are some platform-specific code that we need to provide. For example, I'll start with Android because we have the Android emulator up and running. So what the setup code is doing is newing up the Android version of this Appium driver and providing some Appium option. Appium option is also basically some capabilities or information that you need to provide. For example, which application you're targeting, application ID, main activity, and the emulator that you're going to deploy it to. So there's some platform-specific initialization that you can easily abstract away, just like I've done here. But obviously, if you have to use it in a build CI/CD environment, we probably take a different approach than what I have it here. But for demo purposes, bear with me, we'll go through it. Let's move the emulator a bit away. I hope the font size is big enough. You can see. For me, it is. But if it's not, apologies. I'll try and bump it up. And obviously, the example repository will be shared by the conference organizers after the presentation has finished. So here we are. So let's have a look. What are we doing in Android options? So if we go into the method and see what we're actually doing. By the way, when you pull down this repository, you may have to adjust few variables that is defined here, but that'll be pretty easy to do and it's self-explanatory. So we knew of the Android option for it. First of all, I have to start adding capabilities or adding information that actually Appium requires for able to drive it. First one is if you're using an emulator, you have to provide the emulator ID. You can easily look it up by running a shell command or looking up your ID, which when you actually run the emulator, you'll see on top of it as well. And we also need to provide the app package name, which one it is. If we look into CSproj for a MAUI application, you'll find it in the CSproj. So let's open it up. It's up over here. So this is the application ID that actually gets rendered as a bundle ID for iOS and application ID or package ID for Android. So hold back. The next mod we need to provide is the name of the main activity that we're going to start. So if we don't define a main activity name, what the runtime actually tends to do, it actually creates an activity name for you. So if you open up the APK file and app manifest file, you'll see that generated name, then .main activity. However, if we look into our Android project, let me zoom in here, we can actually define a fully qualified name for our main activity, which will live here somewhere in the Android folder. In main activity, if we zoom out, this is where we can actually define it. It can't be anything gibberish, so it has to be fully qualified. For example, first your application name, bundle ID, then name of the class, and name of the activity. But again, if you want to leave it alone, you can leave it alone. After the APK has been bundled, you can actually go inside the APK file in Android manifest and pull it out yourself. And rest of the capabilities or information are optional. If you like to add them, you can add them. But because we know that we added a platform-specific capability here, the driver will figure out that we need to use UI Automator for Android because that's what we're running here. So if we pull up, so we took this option that we have. We knew of it, like I mentioned previously, we knew of a entry-specific driver for Appium web element and passing the URI where we started our Appium server. So for me, it started in localhost and port 4725/wd/hub and passing the options that we have. And we can optionally pass in a command timeout, like how long the driver should wait before the application launches. And if you don't specify it, it will default to whatever the time is defaulted. But I like to give it at least 10 seconds time for it to boot up and whatnot. So that's it for the setup file. So bringing back to the emulator into the question, we can see as a world-renowned QA tester, my goal here is to find out if the element that is clickable has actually been rendered on the screen, if I can find it, if I can interact with it, and after I interact with it, can I see the value that I expect to? So if we start from the beginning, I know first time we click it, it will increment by 1, and there will be specific text displayed on it. So first test I define here is the click counter button test. So you can see, because I've given it the accessibility ID via automation ID .NET MAUI, we can actually look for it by element ID, which will be defined platform specific ID. And again, Appium is actually abstracting that away. So we have a common set of APIs for both Android and for iOS here. So first, I'm just looking for the ID, say, okay, can I actually locate that element on this grid? If it's not found, it will throw an exception and your test will fail. So you know you're testing if the element that we're looking for has been rendered on the screen or not. And then you can actually interact with it. Again, if the element is not, it will also, again, throw an NRE. So you'd know the application, no, sorry, the element has not been rendered. Just for demo purposes, because it runs very quick, I have added in a delay here, but obviously in a real world scenario, you wouldn't be doing that. So I wouldn't advise to do it either. So following that, we can actually take a screenshot of the actual state after we click on it, so to see visually what we're expecting to see, and actually save the file, and it will be saved in the root of the destination. You can actually specify where you want it to be saved. For example, if you're in a CI/CD environment, you may be in a build a report and send it up, upload it somewhere else. You can do that here as well. And lastly, we're asserting, okay, the element text that we've seen is equals to clicked one time, because after you click it first time, we expect to see it's been clicked one time. So let's say, let's fail this test first. So I want to see, let's say, clicked 0 times, but I know that's going to fail because if everything works fine, it won't be working, and the assert we have will actually fail. So let's run it. I expect it to fail. We'll see it will terminate the app, restart it, and it will output the result in the console. First time when you run the app, it may actually take a bit longer, especially on the iOS side of things, because it needs to install a companion app to run this test. All right, the test actually has failed as we expected to here. It's actually giving me the reason as well on the console, like why it actually has failed. So we were expecting to see it clicked 0 time, as I defined here in the code, but expect the real text we actually got is clicked 1 time. As you can see, we can actually run test for .NET MAUI app. It's exactly the same for Xamarin Forms as well. So let's pass this test now. I want to see green ticks. So I'll say clicked 1 time, rerun the test. I expect it to pass this time. There you go. Clicked once, compared, and the test is a success. It's showing the other one successful as well because I ran it earlier just to test it. And to see the screenshot that we created, we can actually go to the root of the project file there and find out inside .NET 6, click counter test, here it is, taken 11:58, which is exactly the time. Here I am. And there is the screenshot that we have. So I defined 2 tests here. Let's run all of them together to see how that goes. Let's run both tests. For alert, because different platform renders them differently, the Appium driver produces give us an abstraction of it. So we actually have a bit more nicer syntax here, so I don't have to fiddle around, go and find what we're actually looking for. Because alert comes onto the screen after we actually click, after a short while, what we can do, we can actually create a WebDriver wait, which actually waits for the specific time that you define and specific element that we have defined. So here, first of all, we actually pass in the driver that we knew that we specify a time, okay? We're literally telling the driver, let's wait 5 seconds for this particular element to display. If it doesn't appear in 5 seconds, we'll throw an exception and we'll fail the test, because this assert is actually looking for this line of code or lines of code inside this block does not throw an exception. So first one is, okay, let's see if we can actually see the alert. Obviously, you can compare it to something else and return out, but not. But here I'm actually checking for if we actually have the alert on the screen. If we have it, then we actually go ahead and take a screenshot of it, save to the file, and dismiss the alert by clicking the accept method provided by the Appium driver, and we're returning a string empty just to satisfy the func there, the until method is required. So obviously we run both the tests here and on iOS, Android at the moment. So let's go back to the root folder and find out if we have the alert test screenshot as well. As you can see, it's been taken at 11:59. And here we are, the way we expected to see. Right, so if we change our application target to, let's say, iOS now, and run it for iOS simulator, which is iPhone 11, I have it here. Let me get this emulator out of the way so we can see the simulator better. Let me bring it in. Where is it? I'll ping it on top as well so we can see it. This is exactly the same application that we have running before, and we just switched to running on iOS instead of Android. Here we go. Dramatically, nothing changed from the last app that we ran. So again, we have a button that is incrementing its type, count, and we have another button that is showing us the alert. So we'll keep the simulator on top. Let's go ahead and change our value within the enum to target Apple. Again, I'm going to rerun all of them at the same time to see if it actually works. And I've added in a delay because on simulator and emulator, the test runs too quick that you can visually can't perceive if we're actually seeing the number incrementing to 1 and the alert showing and dismissing. So there will be a short delay between them, but obviously in production environment, we wouldn't be doing that. So first test is running for alert. We'll see an alert, gets closed up, a screenshot is taken, then we move on to the next test, which is running here. There we go. We should see an incremented to 1. We do. And done. Again, we can see the screenshot for this particular test has been taken, but I have not distinguished between the iOS screen capture and Android, so they get overwritten every time around the test. But obviously, that's not something goal of this presentation, so we'll be ignoring that. So here we are, the first one, which is increments the counter by 1, running on iOS simulator by look of it, including the time and whatnot. And in a nutshell, that is actually Appium that actually allows you to do automation here. So with that, I'll conclude my demo. We'll go back to the slide. If we have any time for questions, I'm happy to take questions from the audience and answer them. Just to go from here where we actually go, you can actually script this up as a CI/CD compatible script and fully automation and run it on in Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions or even in App Center if you really invest your time in scripting. But for me, this is something to find out that we actually can UI automation for .NET MAUI, and there's something available was a game changer. So we can actually go ahead and vote for MAUI to be our next candidate for the project that we actually came out. My feedback to the management team has already been taken into consideration, and we have a green light to go ahead with MAUI for the project that we actually have at the moment. So if there's any question from the audience, I'll have a quick look and find out. Yes, we don't have any question at the moment, so that's it. Great, yay. I'll be, passing these slides around to the conference organizer, and they'll be happy to share it with you. And again, like I said, you can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, reach out, or you can open an issue in the GitHub repository that I'm going to